Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to TableTakes presented by Gen Con. My name is Chris, and I'm joined, as always, by Bonsai, Emma, and Derek. And I'd like to thank our special guest, Hawk Robinson from RPG Research, who's going to be joining us this week. You may have seen him before if you watched our show live from Gen Con.
Our first returning guest.
Yeah, this is our
first returning guest.
Returning guest on the show.
So
we didn't scare this one off.
Right.
Just like the rest of them.
Yeah, well, you know.
It seems
You
you
make
have a
one
reputation.
10-year-old cry.
We made someone cry?
Wait, when did we?
What? Why?
Now they're
Quoting
making
Darkness
children
Rising.
cry.
So
See, that's why Deadpan is so good. 'Cause
Yeah.
Everyone's like, what? He was hit by a car?
I know, that's awful. Okay, I will make sure that I wink and smile anytime I say something facetious.
Every
for the
time you
rest
talk
of the
about
show.
crying children, you'll make a
We
joke
were
of
just
it.
talking about finger guns.
Finger guns.
That's what they're there for. It's okay to laugh at this.
Yeah.
So we have a lot to get through today, so we are going to jump right into our headlines.
Yes.
Starting with word about Disney.
Oh yes.
Ooh,
Disney.
The friendly mega corporation that controls all of our entertainment from this point forward has got some exciting news for us.
Yes, I'll go ahead and tell you.
me all about
So
it.
you might, and let's not confuse this news with the Netflix adaptation of Magic the Gathering. But if you didn't know, Disney does own Fox now, or has lots of things that Fox used to own. So they announced that they will be doing, before they announced that they was going to do Mega Man, Assassin's Creed, and Magic the Gathering movies. That is now thrown away in the trash can.
No.
They decided, nope.
It's not necessarily a bad thing.
It's not
Did
necessarily.
you see Assassin's Creed 1?
No.
I mean, and also a lot of video
Neither
game
did anyone else.
adaptations of movies.
No, this Magic the Gathering was going to be the next Warcraft movie, and I
That's
was very
why-
And
excited.
I think we really dodged a bullet there.
Yeah, I feel like we really did.
I like these kinds of things.
I like these kinds of things.
Like the
but
Super
Warcraft
Mario
is-
Brothers movie, also excellent.
Get
Great.
out.
And there's also Star Wars prequels you can go watch too.
Yeah, you can.
And you'll have plenty to keep yourself
No,
busy.
that's different, okay?
No, how?
It's different. Because it doesn't have tiny head dinosaur people in it.
That's true.
Oh,
The prequel would have been improved by Tiny Head Dinosaurs.
Absolutely.
Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't. It's not that I didn't find Dennis Hopper believable as Bowser, King of the Koopa.
Right?
I did. He's a very convincing actor. It's just I think they could have made a different hairstyling choice.
Also, the grim, dark Mario universe.
Oh yeah,
So good.
so good.
Like the
Perfect.
weird fungus growing everywhere. Like that place must have smelled awful.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The
Whereas the
Very
entirety of the Warcraft movie stunk.
Oh, fight.
Throw down the gauntlet.
Fight.
roll up my sleeve.
You don't have sleeves on
I know.
today, Emma. There are
No, she just
sleeves.
came in pre-rolled,
Pre-rolled.
ready
She
for your
knew
crap.
this
This
fight
is
was
gonna
going
be
to
a
happen.
thing. Yeah.
But yeah, so sorry guys if you're looking forward to those movies.
Sorry, Emma.
Those are not going to be the case. I think also there may be X-Men on the chopping block as well.
Yeah. Well, as we have heard, because we didn't go see the movie in the theaters, Dark Phoenix bombed
I
at the
did.
box office.
Oh, how was it?
There you go. It did not do well, and Disney is losing a little bit of faith in the X-Men franchise because of that. And so they
It's
are
not the franchise's fault. I'm a diehard X-Men fan, which is why I went to
so
go
am
see
I.
it.
Yeah.
And I will absolutely
The
buy
movies,
it
they were-
streaming, but it didn't get the response that they wanted, and so they are thinking about maybe not releasing
maybe a little
New Mutants
break.
in the theaters. Or
Maybe.
they're still talking
I think
about
they just
it.
kind of here,
they kind of flooded
here was my
the
pitch.
market.
You ready? Because Disney buys Fox. How we get the X-Men, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. My idea is you set the X-Men movies emerging during the snap. So you have the snap. You have a bunch of superheroes gone. Problems still happen.
Yeah.
Maybe that explains why, now the mutants kind of emerge. Just assume that they've been underground before. That's a big change from the comic book timeline.
Yeah.
But it is a way to insert it into the cinematic universe without being why weren't the X-Men doing anything in the 80s? You know what I mean?
They were just all taking naps.
Yep.
It was a
There's
very
definitely
sleepy
that.
decade.
But that's how I would have done it,
Oh, okay. Well, now we all know how Derek would have done it.
and that's
Yeah.
very important.
You put Derek in charge.
I would have gone with the
Yeah.
multiverse thing. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, but
That's how that multiverse works.
Shove everything
they
together.
use multiverse a lot.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's what
So
I'm
let's-
saying. It's tried and
But
true.
portals are cool.
There is-
Portals are cool because they're like rifts.
There's
Have you tried rifts?
Have you tried?
look multiverse. is just silly. We tried that, and like it was just like a multiverse. Who would believe that?
Have you seen
Like every comic book reader
Spider-Man?
ever.
Have you not?
Yeah, that's no
So-
spoilers.
Doctor Strange?
but-
So real good.
Have you not Doctor
Yeah.
Strange?
Literally X-Men.
Real good.
Oh wait, no, that's Sailor Moon. I'm trying to do Doctor Strange.
Although
but it's like
the Doctor
Sailor
Moon,
Moon.
Sailor, the
Doctor
Doctor
Moon.
Moon Sailor
Sailor
Strange
Strange.
crossover, I am all for.
Yep.
Because
All
I'm like,
for.
wait, no, actually,
Can
no.
we please
'Cause
call it Sailor Strange?
Yep.
Sailor Strange.
Although that sounds a little porny.
Yeah,
I really hope somebody in chat can make a Dr. Moon fan art for us.
Doctor Moon.
Our chat is very talented and can most
true.
likely do that.
Yes.
So, there you go. Disney owns everything. We'll continue to own everything. Isn't going to make all those movies that they said they were going to make because they were dumb.
Yeah.
However, we still get to see the Magic the Gathering Netflix series.
Yes.
I think
We
everybody
have-
who likes Magic is excited about that.
And Netflix
But that means I have to
has-
get Netflix.
Maybe we didn't need to see the dumb old Disney version of that. Maybe we didn't.
You could just have family
Please don't
and
shoot me,
friends
Disney.
who have
one of each.
Netflix and you just share the password.
Yeah.
Not that I condone that.
Well, Christian, if you were looking for the Disney version, at least you could just wait, I don't know, 5-10 years.
And they'll make a
when,
live action one.
when
Yeah.
they buy Netflix and then make a live action remake of it that is exactly the same.
I can't wait for the Disney remake of Stranger Things.
In other news.
In other news, speaking of giant mega corporations controlling everything, Wizards of the Coast has unveiled a new product, and I think we're going to hear about that from Emma.
All right, Throne of Eldraine. We talked about this a little bit on the show. They have revealed a lot of the products that are going to go with this. They haven't revealed the prices yet, so we don't have that information, but we know what there is going to be at least.
What some of the contents are. We get some more detail on that.
Some of the content. So releasing October 6th, we have, as usual, the Planeswalker decks, and those are the not great decks that are good beginner things. Well, it's important to know of these products, the kinds of things that might appeal to you as a
Well, so
consumer.
the question that I always had is like, I'm not going to go buy a Planeswalker deck to go compete in the Magic World Championship.
Right, yeah.
But are the Planeswalker decks balanced against the other Planeswalker decks?
Yes,
Then
absolutely.
great.
So they're a great
Like buy a
product.
couple and just play with friends.
Yeah, not the pinnacle of strategic play, but it's a great product if you're getting into Magic. It's also good for beginners and good for kids too. Kids really like the Planeswalkers. They identify with a superhero. We're all children here.
Yeah.
We know this.
Yep.
Yes.
So, Planeswalker, you got someone's face on there. I want the Jace deck, or I want the Nissa deck. It's a very easy sell for that target market. Booster packs, as always. Bundles are, you might know them as fat packs. So recently rebranded to be called bundles. They have your 10 booster packs in there. Some slight changes with the Throne of Eldraine. There's going to be 20 foil lands and 20 regular lands. So if you like those shinies, bundle is a great way to get that. There's also going to be an oversized spin down dice, which I'm very excited
Die.
about.
We
Die.
are not
yes.
British.
We're not British. There's a die. There are going to be oversized spin down dice in all of the bundles. Each individual bundle is going to have one die, and oversized. So like, put in a little bit of swag in those bundles. Pre-release packs, mostly for the pre-release events that you're going to be going to. Theme boosters. So these are specific colors. If you don't want any particular color you find to be boring.
White.
Wait, so they stopped calling them fat packs, obviously, because the name was problematic, but they
Yes.
still have color-based decks?
Yes.
Not for me, thanks.
One of the interesting things from this set in particular is the Brawl Deck. So we have not seen Wizards doing Brawl Decks yet. They announced this format last year, I
Emma,
believe.
What's Brawl?
Brawl, oh yes.
No, tell us about
Let's
Brawl.
talk about
What is
Brawl.
Brawl?
So if you've ever heard of a format called Commander, it's not an official format of the game, but it's something that was originally called Elder Dragon
Something to originally
Highlander.
do with all of your extra magic cards that you weren't using.
That's
for
where
your
EDH
deck.
Yes,
comes from.
EDH, yeah. Elder
Oh.
Dragon Highlander.
No
Commander,
wonder.
EDH,
Nonsense.
same thing. It was a format often, I think, created by judges or people who found the normal formats too boring and they wanted to spice it up a little.
Wait, what kind of judges? Like real Academy judges? Or just volunteers?
Supreme Court judges.
Supreme Court judges.
With the mallet
So-
and everything.
Yep.
Or gavel.
With the original Commander format, you would have 100 cards total, so bigger than your regular deck. each card had to be unique. So again, spicing it up, because a lot of those cards that saw less play because they weren't necessarily top tier, but now you have to put more cards in your deck, so you're going into those like spicier cards and doing some more fun stuff. So Brawl Deck is very similar to that. You can only have one of each card. There's a color identity that helps you create your deck, which is kind of cool. So you'll have your commander, which is going to be a legendary creature or planeswalker, kind of in charge of your
Didn't they have like
deck
the oversized cards
thematically.
for the commanders for that theme that they were doing for a while?
You can get oversized of a lot of the commanders, which
So
is...
it's not like they've never ever supported the idea of commander decks.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, and they do sell commander decks, so it is something
Commander's
that-
gotten like more and more prominent over the past, 3-4 years?
Yes.
Something like
Well,
that?
as we collect more cards, we have more cards that we don't use, and that's what commander decks are for.
But I think
Yeah,
the
just
difference
put
with
all
Brawl
of them in there.
is the difference with Brawl decks that Emma was talking about before. I think is that Brawl decks are 60 cards.
Yes.
They're a little bit smaller, and it sounds like maybe the format is just slightly different.
Yeah,
too?
well, they're standard legal. So that's the important thing. This is a rotating format. And it's something to potentially make it easier to get into a commander-like format. Because the thing about traditional commander is it's pretty much any card ever printed. So you can get some swingy power levels, you can get some crazy stuff going on in these commander decks, but with the standard ones, it will be a more familiar card pool for people who are
Currently
just getting
playing,
into,
right.
currently just getting
Would
into
you say
it.
it's the standardization of Commander?
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure we can move on to another topic from here.
Yeah, well, so it's 2 to 6 players, and it's also coming to Arena, which is cool. 1v1 Brawl is coming to Arena, so if you do want to test it out there, get into some of these physical decks, they're really pushing this
Very
sort
cool.
of
And
format.
this is designed to play with more than just 1v1. You can.
Yes,
This is 2 to 6 players.
2
you
to
said?
6, yeah. Traditionally, Commander has been funner, like it also being a multiplayer format at those higher player counts. So 3, 4, 5. I've played Commander games. It's like chaos. You can target anybody. Like you're trying to keep people alive for longer, so that the person who's take down the person who's winning, and then somebody comes from behind. So it's like a very fun, intense, often multi-hour format.
You've just described several of my favorite activities.
Yes, for multiple hours. So Brawl is super exciting. Also, the first time that we're seeing specifically these collector boosters. So there have been master sets and very cool, fancy, exciting booster packs before, but these are the ones we had mentioned. They had said the price before. We're not sure if
they
it's
said
going
a
to be
range of prices, I think.
$20 to $25. But they've specifically said what's going to be in here, being 1 rare or mythic rare with extended art, 1 foil rare or mythic rare, 9 foil commons or uncommons, special frames. So there's going to be a lot of very fancy stuff in here.
fancy.
So that'll be an interesting product to check out as well if you like.
And that's what had
the
raised.
bling.
That's what had raised some of the controversy
Card
when they
bling.
initially
Yeah.
announced
Yeah.
some of the details.
Yeah, well, because for the price point for, we've seen these packs before, maybe $10, maybe $15, $20 to $25 for a pack, and potentially a lot of those cards not necessarily playable in your deck. A lot of people want to have the same of each card type, like have a whole set of things.
Well, so let's say it goes for 20.
Yeah.
For 20, for about 15 cards, you
Yeah.
know, a little bit more than $1 per card.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that as somebody who's getting into Magic now?
Someone who's getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's really a new player thing. I think it's for people who have been into Magic
Sure.
for a while.
But like, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, you know, we were talking about the price point being higher
Yeah.
than anticipated.
Yeah.
Do you know, what's your kind of gut feeling on the stuff that they've announced are going to be in it?
I think it's going to be a little bit of a tough sell, again, unless these cards really end up being worth a lot. Because a lot of times when you're looking at the price of a pack, $3 for a pack, $4 is not a crazy amount. A lot of people will crack. You know, you might do a couple of those.
Yep, just for the rush of it.
Yeah, and you might get a very high value card. In a pack like this, you kind of want to be able to reap some money from the cards that you've bought. And it's going to be swingier, right? You might get a pack with a bunch of cool looking cards, but the whole value of the pack, a lot of these could be $1, $2. So a lot of it's going to come down to the resellability of these cards. And also one thing that we had talked about
Something
earlier
always
was
scares me.
the
The idea of buying cards to resell them.
right, well, the fluidity
It's
of
such-
the
it's such a-
market.
but it's such a part of the Magic culture. I mean, which
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
came right over from like the sports
Yeah, I
card
was about to say,
culture.
it worked great for comics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it's the same kind of thing. It's just such a scary market. Like the idea of buying cards to get money
Resell.
back from
like-
them
like my-
instead of to play the game.
It's
that
a
they're designed to
gambling
play.
kind of thing, though.
Well, my opinion
I know.
on it has really just always
That's
been
what
like,
bothers me about it.
you can do it, but you got to commit to it. If you're not going to commit to it, then like don't worry about it. You know, like if you end up getting some cool stuff and sell it, great. But like if you're just a casual fan, like if it comes up, it's a nice bonus. But otherwise,
Can you
don't
be a
worry
top
about it.
player without doing it?
No, top players, I think you can just go buy the cards. You don't have to sell the cards back.
Right, but in order to get to that level, I mean, you'd think that selling and trading cards is such a huge part of it. I mean, that's why.
Sure.
Yeah.
But also I've never had any illusions of me being anything resembling a top player, so that's never really bothered me.
Well, the big
Right.
thing about it is if you are a more competitive player, you're probably not cracking a lot of booster packs. I think as someone getting into this, there is that rush of like, oh, I might get a cool foil card. I might get a card that I really need for my deck. But honestly, if you're trying to play competitively or even just play a certain style of deck, like there's just so many cards now. And if you're cracking those packs and making a kitchen table deck by just putting things in there, it's a very kind of a limited, like not a lot of people play like that because then somebody is bringing a better deck to your kitchen table and then you have to get the better cards. So,
So
there's-
I'm just trying to figure out who these collector boosters are marketed to, because it doesn't seem to be the more advanced players because they're
I
just
think
buying
it's- I think it's the
individual
collectors.
cards. And
Collectors.
yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of people who collect Magic cards. You know, like they
Not
they,
for playing, just like for having.
for playing or having or like
Art.
they
like
really
when
just
we used to get the Garbage Pail Kids cards just to have them.
Yeah.
or if,
Everything
actually
you've
have
got collectors,
Yeah.
role-playing games and Cabbage Patch dolls and whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
There'll always be a percentage of the population that's just doing.
and I think there's going to be people who want to do this because they want to get enough foils to make their all foil all cat deck. Like
Or put them in your commander deck.
That's
I didn't
smart.
say
I
your
think
all
that's
foil
smart.
all cat didn't have to be a commander deck too.
Right. Well, I'm working on potentially a cat commander deck, so
I think
I just have
we should
cat
have
commanders.
segued.
No
Yeah.
one is
On
surprised
the
by
brain.
that. That is
Yeah,
awesome.
I think my wife now has multiple cat commander decks
Yes.
because everybody at Card Kingdom and Mox always tries to get her play.
Yeah.
And the way they do it, they're like, hey, we made you another cat commander deck.
And it's like interesting. So I think it'll be interesting to
I'll
see
play it.
how this collector's pack works out. Like what I like about Wizards is that they do experiment with things, you know, so maybe everything will go great. These cards will be in the market. People will be able to buy and sell them. Maybe it will be a flop. It really remains.
Well,
to be
here's another
seen.
thing to look at it. Like this might be a little bit off base because I'm not deep in the Magic community, but think about. I'm sure all of us have had feelings and emotions
Yeah.
about some RPG luxury products. Like think about I go to Wormwood and I buy a nice wooden box. You know, I go to Gen Con and I buy a bunch of really nice dice. Like I was showing off those dice that I got at Gen Con.
Yeah.
Like. It seems to be becoming clear that the community and the industry and stuff like that are realizing that people who play games sometimes kind of want an outlet for their money
Yeah.
for a more luxury thing.
Yeah.
So maybe this is just going to be the Magic version of that.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody's going to get it. Not everybody's going to go get the metal meteorite mammoth bone dice. But somebody's
Because they're a
gonna.
limited edition.
Yeah.
Well, they're also the interesting thing about this versus a nice wooden deck, dice box, or very nice dice is it's a little harder to show them off.
Sure.
So you have your binder, but often people don't have binders as much anymore. They don't bring their binders. Some people definitely still do that.
So what
but-
I'm hearing you say is Wizards now needs to, now they put this out, it's
Yes.
successful, let's say, they need to then release the ready to hang on your wall
The display thing.
display case
Yeah.
that you just slide everything into.
But also with archival glass, because if you have those hanging up and the light gets in there and
Yep.
the cards fade,
Yep, see?
disaster.
See?
Yep.
This
Yeah.
is the first step
protection,
down a
yeah.
long plan, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
This doesn't seem expensive at all. It's okay. Some people got money to throw around. In
Yeah.
fact, some people can just buy up entire distribution sites.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about Asmodee because they just picked up a North American distributor and in Canada, and it's not the first one that they've picked up. They've also got one in Taiwan and one in Chile.
Well, so Asmodee's been on, a acquisition spree for a couple years,
Yeah.
but then it calmed down for a little bit, and I think since July they've picked up 3 distributors. July was when they grabbed Skyship covering Chile, apparently. And then very recently, they picked up Kids Power International in Taiwan and Lion Rampant in Canada. So I think is this a trend that they're going to buy a bunch more things again? But I'm also just really curious, is this a sign of where they see emerging markets that are going to grow rapidly in the near future? Or are they acquiring these so that they have a little more insurance or a diversified market for if/when that inevitable, the board game bubble is going to burst anytime now, constant refrain we hear in the
Right.
US?
Yes.
I think, so these are markets that we're seeing that are hungry for board games. When you see a lot of people looking at Kickstarters or potentially complaining about Kickstarters for, hey, it's harder for us to get Kickstarter games, it's harder for us to get newer games coming to our countries. So potentially having Asmodee supporting this and running it and having this international network, there's, again, a lot of emerging markets that are just on the cusp of getting into this and can be huge for getting games in there on a more consistent basis.
But yeah, no. I mean, it is quite interesting to have, maybe they'll start a new global revival in different areas. Because, you don't really hear about a big board game scene in Taiwan or in Chile, so maybe that is just a new market for them to go into, or it also may cut down on shipping costs for themselves if they have all of these distributions in all of these different countries. So hey, it's cheaper for people to get the game.
We do hear a lot about the Japanese board game design community. I'm pretty sure that it was either Singapore or Taiwan that did have a really, really vibrant board game community as well. So I would love to see those kind of gain more worldwide awareness and prominence.
Yeah.
And I think we were talking briefly about South America.
Yeah, so I had a conversation 10 years ago with a PhD level researcher who went down to, I think it was Brazil. It's a little fuzzy. I was trying to find the email dialogue from way back when. He went down to Brazil to introduce role-playing games to the community there and to see what the impacts would be, et cetera. And he was able to get the government to support proliferating that throughout the country. So they were offering it at libraries and schools and other government. So it had government backing. Well, next thing you know, so the 80s were the kind of the golden age in the US for role-playing games. In the 90s, it was South America had a huge boom. And I think he was a big part of that because then it kind of spread from country to country.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have seen that Brazil pops up more than you might expect, or I guess more than I might expect, in discussions about D&D and vampire communities in particular.
Well, there's several very active groups down there and a couple of research teams down there. It's all in
Nice.
Portuguese and such. But
Yeah.
I feel like it seems like it directly relates to how many dark metal bands that they have in that country. Brazil has tons.
well, Finland as well.
Yeah.
They love the gaming in
Oh,
Finland.
Yeah.
But anyway, he then, when he was talking to me 10, 12 years ago, was then moving to Japan to try to do the same thing. And I don't know if it's if he's the causality or not, but you're seeing the tabletop role-playing games rise.
I like to
in
imagine that
popularity.
this individual is some sort of
Wizard?
RPG Johnny
Johnny
Appleseed.
Appleseed.
We have a role called the RPG advocate, which
Yeah.
that's the whole purpose, is to go out and spread the word and debunk the myths, show the research, and help people get programs going in their area. That's much what we do.
And one more thing about this news, we're talking about getting more games into these countries more easily, but also, like you had mentioned, the designers in Japan getting games from other countries and from other cultures. I'm very excited to see more games that aren't necessarily created in the US or in Europe, and cool new themes that
That's
we could be
something that
seeing.
I've for a number of years I've really tried to do something like that at Gen Con, where I wanted to set aside a room and an evening at Gen Con where it was just games that were not designed first in English,
Yeah.
or at least not in the US or Europe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was not a whole lot at that point,
Yeah.
or there's not a whole lot of support structure to do that. But I would really love to see some of these emerging markets kind of bring a little bit of that presence to Gen Con.
Yeah.
Because I would love to walk into a room and be like, there's the Japanese games and the Chilean games
Yeah.
and the Argentinian games and the African
The
games.
UN
Could help
South
you with
African
that.
games.
Yeah.
Could help you with that.
Well, maybe
Yeah,
we should.
We've got connections around the world. We have staff across 5 continents.
We should
So
probably
they're all
talk.
gaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should talk.
And another important thing about role-playing games versus like the collectible card games and the video games is the affordability of a tabletop role-playing game. Right? Yes, you can spend the rest of your money at premium
Just
experiences,
all of
etc.
it.
Yeah.
I like how you looked right at me when you said that. Did you see him looking right at me when
Yeah,
you said
the rest of your money. Is there a story?
It was a
All
broad
your
angle.
monies, yeah.
I have been known to spend the rest of my money on role-playing games.
I feel like
multiple
there's a little
times.
telltale heart element there. I think
Yeah.
we all felt he was
I-
looking at us.
Stop
Yeah.
that
Well, and it's a
damn
self-reflection.
Yeah.
beating! Rolling
So
dice.
you only need to spend X amount on the core rules and maybe some setting info, and then you can play indefinitely. This is why role-playing games have had a lot of trouble having a sustainable income, and FFG and the others try to address that through cards and tokens and things like that to try to make it more of a repeating income.
Yeah.
But for countries, that have lower incomes and such, this is a great way for an activity that can be repeated over and over and over, for generations.
Nice. Yeah. Cool.
Well, that's done with our headlines. Our headlines are
Yes.
finished. We get to move on to our topic today, which I'm very
special
excited
treat.
about.
Very
special treat.
topic.
Returning guest Hawk Robinson from RPG Research is here to talk to us today about RPGs as a tool for social good. Now, Bonsai's been digging into this topic thoroughly.
Yes.
And we have a lot to go over. So
We do.
I'm hoping we can get through a lot of it today, but there is just so
There's-
much here.
This is a rabbit hole.
We
let's
could
just say.
talk to Hawk about this stuff just on this page
Yeah.
for days.
Dave.
Yes.
I have many classes that are weeks long on these topics.
On these topics. So,
Yeah.
we are gonna
So boil it down and just give it.
Yeah.
We're giving you
Yeah,
the
like half an
Reader's
hour.
I will, yeah. I will try to be
Digest,
concise.
For those who probably didn't see next week's or last YouTube's video or whatever, can you introduce yourselves
Yeah.
and
Okay,
why
yeah.
you're important in this field?
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell
What
us
is
why
your
you're
worth
good.
to society?
What is your
Justify
word?
your existence.
Why? What is your
For the
class?
title that they've been starting to pass around.
Oh, yes.
Which now my second son just told me he got married this week too,
Oh,
so I may be getting closer to
congratulations.
living up to.
Oh, my gosh, you almost are the...
Wait, what is the title? Oh.
So some of the professional peers have been introducing me at the different cons, and he did last session as the grandfather of therapeutic gaming because I've been doing it longer than anybody else. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not ready to be a grandfather. No, not yet. Well, two of my 3 sons are now married.
I think it's one of those things that happens to you, not
Don't
that
worry.
you decide.
I can
Yeah.
guarantee you that neither of your sons are going to have a baby.
Oh,
Yes, right. Good point. Yes. So anyway,
I get it. Yeah.
I've been
on
gaming
their own.
gaming since 1977. I started researching the effects of role-playing games in 1983, implementing role-playing games in educational settings since 1985, and in therapeutic settings since 2004. I'm the founder and president of RPG Research, a 501c3 nonprofit studying the effects of all role-playing game formats, tabletop, live action, electronic, and hybrids, and their potential to help improve lives. And then also I have a private practice that now has employees and everything called RPG Therapeutics LLC, which is a for-profit company. So a lot of times as we're doing the research and all the programs, so 5 days a week we're research, 2 days a week we're community programs at RPG Research, people would say, oh, would you do birthday parties? No, that's outside of our scope. Oh, would you come and train our staff, or we want to do an executive retreat and do team building and all this? Like, that's not what RPG Research does. So due to demand, right, capitalism, supply and demand, I kept, but RPG Therapeutics could do that. Yeah, I could do that. And so that had become consulting and private practice and therapy and education and training and all of that. And we've got online courses we've been uploading. I have over 100 classes now that I've taught over the years related to becoming an RPG professional, implementing it in educational, recreational, entertainment, and therapeutic settings. And I'm trying to move all those online so it can scale better.
Nice.
Yeah.
Although PayPal won't take money from Greece from one of the clients that wants to take classes there. I don't know what that's about. But
There's a few countries like that. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, we don't do PayPal.
yeah.
The money is too guaranteed. We're not into that, especially in Greece.
So one of the things that helped form RPG Research, besides my going into TR and the books saying we need more cooperative activities, that there's a dearth of those. There's lots of competitive activities, there's too few cooperative. But the other one was, as I did the research about role-playing games, in 2004 there were maybe 50 studies, and most of them were just correlational and meta-analysis, very few causal controlled studies. Okay, so I'm
what's the
using
difference
technical
there?
babble there. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
what are those two things?
So correlation does not prove causality.
Yep.
An example being the whole story about storks and babies.
Yes.
Goes back to
Wait, what? They don't?
Yeah. So it was a northern
Spoiler.
European town.
Wait, hold the phone.
Northern European town. They noticed that when there were a lot more storks in town, nesting in the chimneys and things like that, that the following year they had a lot more pregnancies. And so they were thinking that somehow the storks were increasing the fertility rate somehow of that. Well, a little bit more research shows that no, that's not causality, that's correlation. What was happening was in the colder winters, more storks would nest in the chimneys to stay warm. So you would see more of them. Well, what also usually happens when it's really cold outside and nobody wants to go outside?
Role-playing
D&D.
games.
Other
Yes.
activities, yes, other activities. And
Wait, does D&D make babies?
Oh, you really haven't been playing long.
No.
so that's a correlation
Yeah.
versus causality, and people often conflate the two and
Yeah.
mix the two up. So by 2004, there were about 50, 60 studies that were worth noting, and most of them were to disprove all the negative stereotypes and claims from the 80s and 90s about role-playing games. The claims that role-playing games are more likely to make you commit suicide, homicide, make you antisocial, that there are no female gamers, et cetera, et cetera.
I've been trying to break that particular stereotype for a long time.
Yeah, well, and before 1982, 83, I saw pretty much average, it was male-female balanced games. But when the stigma started, I did see a rapid decline in female participation in games.
So the stigma caused it.
Well, that becomes self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling
I know,
prophecy,
yeah.
it's a real thing.
It is. Well, and like in the 90s, I became a closet gamer, as I talked about last time, because of fear of my career. Leaving Gen Con the week before, coming back, we were asked to visit some people on the way back. And there's a group there who's big on accessibility advocacy and such. And met us with their proud gamer shirt worn proudly and doing selfies and such. And then when we get outside, hurried and threw a shirt over it. I'm like, what's going on here? And he's like, oh, I don't dare in my hometown walk around with gaming shirt on. It would not be good. Bad things would happen. This is still an issue. And so anyway, so we're out there advocating, we're studying research, and one of the reasons RPG research exists is to try to develop more causal controlled studies. There are a handful of them.
Yes.
And since 2006, they've been showing up more and more. It's going up exponentially. And we've been a big mover in that. Because we've aggregated all the world's research into a single site, we've had many emails from master's thesis and doctoral dissertation students saying, oh, thank you so much. You just saved me months of work. I can move forward. However, the other reason there isn't very much out there is the universities then say no. That doesn't represent the values of our university to do studies on role-playing games. They're a little more open to video games, but the tabletop side and the live action side. So we have now PhDs and active professors at other universities have now joined our research team because they can't get the okay to do the research at their university. And we have over 200 research questions we want to answer. And that all depends on funding. We now have a staff. We've now got more than a dozen researcher assistants, and we're working our peer review and everything. And now we've just got to get our Patreon and everything else to grow, and we can answer those questions. So with that caveat being said, with the research that is available, outside of the peer-reviewed journals, I get all sorts of other research sent to us that never see the light of day in journals. They never get through the process, whatever. But many of them are IRB, Institutional Review Board oversight. They had, institutional peer review at that university, but they never submitted to the journal for whatever reasons. And so the good thing is, there is research out there. It's just you're not going to find it in your university databases where most of the research is done. We have that content that nobody else has. And so that's kind of what we're here, and we want to get the causal study. We want to prove it. We want to know what the dangers are too. We're not. We want to be unbiased about it and figure out where the good and the bad is, because it's not a panacea. There's always consequences to anything.
Right.
And we want to know where the thresholds are, because if you don't know the thresholds,
then you don't.
bad things happen. And we're hearing in the last 2 years practitioners who are going in and trying to do this on their own without proper training, and it's blowing up. And people are getting hurt in the process, either physically or emotionally.
An example?
Most of them are under NDA. One I can give you because it's fairly public, which led to a contract. There's an alternative school in Spokane, which is the alternative school for all the alternative schools in Eastern Washington. So you have high school, and you have K through 12 and high school, and these kids aren't getting by for various reasons, whether it's because low, they have barely 80 IQ, they have disabilities, family situation with drugs, gang, violence, all kinds of issues. They're not able to make it in the normal high school system, so they get put in their district's alternative system.
Right.
Then they didn't make it there either, so then they get sent to this school. And so this is their last chance to try to graduate, without going to a GED or something. And they set up very specific programs. They get a lot of one-on-one attention, and it does help a lot of kids turn around, right? A lot of these are heading straight to prison if they don't turn things around, which we talked about previously.
Yes.
So we have these teachers who are highly trained, know this population very well, and a few of them happen to be pretty experienced gamers. Not same caliber of decades, but certainly 10 years or more. And they took 2 knowledge domains and tried to put them together and to try to implement an after-school program using that. Now, in normal populations, that's never a problem. It's not the game's fault. But in their case, they had to cancel it because it blew up. Tables got flipped, the school went on lockdown, there was physicality to it. It was not handled well. They're still determined to still try to do it even after that. They realized they didn't quite have the combination of knowledge, so they reached out to us some months later when they heard about us and asked us to do a presentation. And the number one thing we had to do is shoot down all the myths first, because all the parents were like, what about the occult? And
What about Satan?
and what about all the violence and all these things? And we were able
Yeah.
to one by one show study after study, debunking the myths and showing the reality. And that made the principal happy and the parents happy, et cetera. And then he said, great, we want you to run a program every week. Like, whoa, our volunteers will burn out if we do that all the time. Let me hand you off to the LLC. And then we went through months of negotiations with the district and the paperwork and all that. And we got in and we started a program with some of my employees. And under my supervision, went beautifully,
Nice.
without a hitch.
Oh,
and these
nice.
kids are so intrinsically motivated. They would show up to school in the morning just so they'd have permission to be able to be in the activity, right? Because they had to attend everything if they wanted permission to be in this.
Right.
Yeah.
They would hold on to themselves. So this is all about behavior self-management.
Okay.
And they would, if they had a really, really bad day, and oh man, it was painful to watch how these kids struggled, they would excuse themselves to go to the room where they're allowed to go scream and yell and stuff so they could come back and continue the game. They held on to themselves. And all the teachers were just like, this is amazing. It's a complete 180
Yeah.
in their behavior. Now that's all about intrinsic motivation there,
Yeah.
because they're not being made to do it. And on their score things, when they show how was this experience on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, it was 11.
Yeah.
It was 99. It was the best experience I've ever had in my life, which is also kind of sad, right? Because these kids, and just to say how bad it is, during spring break, when they come back, the school's a war zone after, because the kids didn't eat most of the time while they were gone. When they're not there getting school breakfast and lunch and such, they're starving and they're in a very bad home front. School is their safe haven.
Right.
Washington State has made these alternative schools illegal. They say it's unconstitutional, it's segregation and separate but equal. So they are now putting all these kids back. So what happened was, when that leaked out towards the end of the school year, this was just this year, a lot of kids stopped showing up. They're like, you don't care about me, why should I bother? State doesn't care, you don't care, why should I even bother anymore? We were setting these goals and plans, and I was working hard to do it, and you guys don't care. And so I'm afraid that's going to just be catastrophic this coming school year, because all these kids are being shoved back into the mainstream, and they do need these extra resources. Now, the state claims they're going to, these teachers are going back to the mainstream schools where they can, and they're going to try to help, and they're all going to have IEPs and all these other things to try to help. And for some kids, that will still work. But you're going to have a lot more falling through the cracks and ending up more in the legal system and
Well, it's a
potentially
good
incarcerated.
thing that Washington State schools have a history of being well-funded and well-supported, right?
Let's be careful on that whole narrative, but yeah, that's a whole other thing. So, and speaking of the prisons thing, so we were here last time talking about the documentary on role-playing games in prisons, that, they're banned in most prisons.
Yes.
They also used to be banned at schools and libraries, and I used to be gaming in the 80s, and the libraries kicked us out.
They were
after a
banned
point.
at our schools.
Yep. And that was all because of Patricia Poling from Bothered About Dungeons & Dragons and her movement, in conjunction with Dr. Thomas Radecki and the National Council Against Television Violence. They had a huge impact. Radecki's now in jail, and Poling died in the 90s from ailment. But the lingering effects are still here to this day, as we talked about with Southern Illinois and with the parents, et cetera. So,
But I do think there are more schools and there are more libraries that, when the topic comes up, are very hungry for someone to do something.
Fortunately, it is turning around.
Yes.
It is really, really, really turning around. Thank goodness. But we still have to go out there and address it. Others are doing it on their own, and that's great. And the same thing with the prisons, where most of them are banning, but some have loosened up a little. And this documentary covers it. Now, unfortunately, the Kickstarter didn't make it. It was just under 40K.
Yeah.
Yesterday when it ended, it was trying to get 60K as a minimum for the post-production costs.
Yeah.
She's not giving up. Elizabeth DeClere's the producer. She's been on like National Geographic, Discover, BBC, Vice. You know, she's a well-established documentary producer. So she's not giving up. The community, we saw the usual spike at the end, and the community tried, but it was too little too late. So she's going to try this time to get the word out in advance.
Yes.
And try to
So
engage the community.
is she planning to do another Kickstarter, or is she planning
That's
on
the
a
hope.
different way to try to raise money to support the project?
She's working. She's looking into it. She's possibly another Kickstarter.
Okay.
Because it was close, but she wants to see it really succeed. Because there's a lot of other things we could do with
So
stretch
if this is
goals.
a topic that people are interested in, and
Yes.
they miss the Kickstarter,
Yes.
they might want to follow the Kickstarter and
Yes.
check on it later to get any updates for when the
So
project relaunches.
RPGdocumentary.com or just RPGDOC for Department of Corrections. That's the website I set up for them. Just donate it to them. There is a contact page. You can just email them, say, add me to your
Nice.
contact list. We're looking at setting up some sort of announcement email list to help spread the word. Whatever.
A lot of
whatever
companies have done
happens.
that, where it's,
Yeah.
you know, you sign up for our email list, so we'll let you know day
Yeah,
one when it
Exactly.
launches.
Exactly. And that will link to the Kickstarter so that you can comment and everything there.
Yeah. For people who are not aware of how exactly does role-playing games help in these situations, I can go ahead and give you a quick rundown. Some things that they do is basically help people with trauma or PTSD. Provides a layer of separation from people when they have to enact something and work through something. They have like that buffer system that they don't have to worry, this is happening directly to me, it's going to trigger emotions and something that I don't feel. So if it's done properly, it can help work out through those issues in a slow and gamified manner, you could say. Another reason is socialization for a lot of people who aren't used to talking to people, who maybe there's clear set rules that they can follow to talk and to normalize something and to understand hey, maybe you don't want to call somebody a slur word because of this.
Even just on a very basic level,
Yeah.
that's something that I've always said gaming helps everybody. You don't have to be in kind of a demographic or a population that people usually would describe as needing special needs or assistance or having particular problems. The opportunity to socialize with your peers is something everybody can benefit from. And I think one of the things that had made gaming so popular and enduring, particularly with socially awkward nerds, is that it is a way to socialize with people. It's a way that you have to socialize with people, but it does it in a way that's usually pretty clear with rules of how you're supposed to engage.
Yes.
Like if I go to play Magic with you, if I have never known you before, not only do I immediately have something to talk with you about, but there's very specific rules on, not quite, but kind of when I'm supposed to talk, when you're supposed to talk.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's the
Taking
expectation
turns.
that it goes back and forth. There's a whole lot that's kind of wrapped up in that that's just good to practice.
Yep.
Like any other behavior is good to practice. So, one of the things that whenever we get into discussions on the social good games can do and things like that is just remember that it's not just for people who are at risk of something else.
Yes.
It's for everybody. If that's just a better social good for you and your friends and your family to sit down and play a game with them.
Yeah.
But in this case, the rules themselves are part of the therapy, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
Role-playing itself has been used in psychological therapy for a very long time.
Yeah, role play, psychodrama, gestalt, all these different role play
But it
techniques.
doesn't, it's a type of therapy that has been known to work. But
Within
there are
certain parameters.
Right, within certain parameters. There are certain people who don't respond well to role-playing therapy for whatever reason. A lot, autism spectrum
The lack
being,
of the structure is overwhelming. Being too open-ended and too free form, it causes a lot of anxiety. And it's not just autism spectrum. So like we work with social phobias and such, which is more than stage fright or just talking to people. I mean people who become complete recluses. They have everything delivered. Their parents and family have enabled this further, but they have panic attacks. If they go outside, they have panic attacks. And then because of that fear of another panic attack in public, which can be humiliating, they stay home.
Yes.
And I've had multiple clients where through basically an exposure therapy process using role-playing games. We start them with like a solo adventure, and then either computer-based or book, to kind of introduce them to the concept of role-playing gaming. And then I introduce them to a safe online role-playing multiplayer, small multiplayer group that I know that they're not going to get a lot of, mean people, right? Which happens out there. We've got
On
research
the
about
internet?
that. Yes, exactly.
Curated internet humans.
Yeah, and then we actually have our own, like we create modules using the Winter Nights Aurora toolkits and such for targeted clients and such. And we're working on some other programs to put out there as open source. And then have them come watch the games I was running in our offices, which was a controlled, safe environment. Then let them participate. So each time we test their anxiety level, once their anxiety level is below a certain threshold through exposure, then we up the ante a little bit more. And then eventually within a few weeks, they were participating in the game. And then I take them and go watch with a game master I trust at a public gaming venue. Right? This is another big jump, but with a game master I trust, and then do a few sessions with them, just getting used to that. And then finally they join the game, and then they're participating. So now I have clients out there, it's been years, and some generalize more than others. So a lot of what you're talking about is when you create this alter ego of the player character. It's a safe space that's other than you, and you can experiment with all kinds of things that would be socially inappropriate otherwise, and do combat and other things that you would never do really, and with people with disabilities even more so.
Yes.
Right? And so the trick is then taking it outside of the therapy or game bubble, right? Because there are people who go to church, they're very reverent and everything, and they say all the right things and do all the right things on Sunday, and the rest of the week they are jerks.
Yeah.
And then Sunday they're back to it again.
Yeah.
That's a lack of generalization from environment, right? So we want so you want a therapist or a facilitator to then have conversations, processing discussions, that after you have a session or while stuff is happening, or stopping it if their levels get too high, and have a discussion about what's going on. A key aspect of this is, and I believe you had it in there, but conversation about bleed. So you have bleeding, from character to person, person into character, and breaking the magic circle and the social contract. And a wonderful resource for that is Professor Sarah Lynn Bowman. She's out of Texas. When it comes to LARPs, especially live action role playing, she helps organize the Living Games Conference. She's on the International Journal of Role Playing. She's a wonderful resource, and she has multiple videos on bleed. If you want to know more about that, definitely check that. Again, all these things we have on our website.
What's her name again?
Sarah Lynn Bowman. And she's got a website and everything, and we link to that. So she's a great resource on all of those things. And so you have yourself, then the game gives you an alibi to play this character and do these things that normally would not be okay to do. Right?
Yeah.
You're going in and
Murder hobo.
Stabbing.
But in the
people.
context of the game, it's allowed. And despite the current trends that come and go about game violence and such, research refutes most of those claims. There are exceptions with certain types of aggressive trait behavior things, but for the majority of people who participate in these types of games, there's actually a great benefit to having this as an outlet as opposed to going postal at school or something like that. It's a healthier outlet for some of that frustration. And then when you
For
have
everybody.
for everybody, yes, for everybody.
Yeah,
That's what I mean, for everybody. And
I
then
would never go to school nowadays, ever.
for those who want to have who are working on therapy and such, then you have these processing discussions and say, okay, and you stop and encourage the mindfulness and start getting them thinking in context of what was your character thinking? What would you do? How would you, if you were going forth and you wanted to be like Rogar the Barbarian and stand up to a bully and such, you're not going to swing an axe at him. We know that. That's outside of the social
He
contract.
has an intelligence of 4.
But maybe that that's that a lot of people that come in with learned helplessness. They've had so many failures and they've been put down so many times that they're like a beat dog, and they've just become used to that. And then these games, like I'll give you an example. This girl came in. Oh man! So facts and figures. Give you some anecdotes.
Yeah.
The girl came in. I'm afraid to do this, but came in literally walking like this, just hunched over. 12-year-old girl in our community program.
Aww.
And the mother was like, she really wants to try this, but she's really afraid, and she's too nervous about all the other kids there. Would you do a session with her alone? And so I had one of our GMs do that. And she starts the game, just in a ball, basically the fetal position, just so protective. And I keep notes at all these community programs and observe all of the participants and such. So again, we do baselines, we measure these things, we have measurable results.
Nice. Yeah.
And as I watched, 15 minutes go by and her body language has changed a little bit to this. And her body language is, and finally her feet had been up off the floor and they're now 1 foot on the ground, then eventually the other one. She's slowly loosening up. Now she's leaning forward, not protectively, with focus.
With engagement.
When she came in, she talked like this. You could barely hear what she was saying. About 45 minutes, 60 minutes into the game, we do about 2.5, 3 hour sessions. She's like, no, my elf's gonna stop those goblins, right? I could hear her across the room. She's not yelling, but she's exerting, she was using her assertiveness and standing up for herself, and then she was also helping some others and such. And it just, transformation in a single session. Now to generalize that, you need repetition, and you need to be able to have conversations. Now in the community programs, it's not therapy. We get a lot of at-risk youth there, and I train my volunteers as best as possible. So we try not to have the therapy discussions in the community setting, but we do have the conversations about what did you learn? And they do fill out little questionnaires about what they learned, and we get feedback from that, and you watch this progress. Now what's different about our program, so there was recently the wonderful Adam Davis with Game to Grow, previously Wheelhouse Workshop. So they were the Charity of the Year at Gen Con. And they're doing great programs. And when they were Wheelhouse Workshop, I came out and scoped out what they were doing and gave them about 4 pages of recommendations. And then Game to Grow, and they're doing a great job. And they've got their Critical Core game coming out. But it says in their CNET interview, we don't do any baselines, we don't have any measurements. Our measurement is that we have a 94% retention rate of our players, which is great. It means they're having a great time and they're going to get benefits from that repetition. And I've watched the Adams and I'm not worried about their program. Like there's others I'm a little worried about. Not worried with theirs, they are well trained and they do a great job. But that doesn't determine efficacy. That just determines that they're doing a good job GMing and keeping them there and they're having a good RPG experience.
That could be about the GMs and the players more
Which
than
it is, because they do a great job. Yeah, that doesn't prove that it's helping the kids. I know it is.
There's a big difference between a very fun and engaging activity and one that you can objectively demonstrate is accomplishing.
And I know they're helping them. I know this, but they don't do the documentation for it. And I hope over time they'll have the staff and resources. That's part of their goal, to improve that. But we have kind of an opposite mission in all of our programs with the LLC and with the nonprofit. Our goal is that we launch them and they don't come back. We want them to build autonomy and self-sufficiency. I mean, this is a very recreation therapy perspective, that you start them out on the slot car, roller coaster, railroaded thing, and you walk them through everything, and then slowly over time, they get a little more freedom, so now they're on the training wheels, and then eventually you get to the open sandbox. Well, it's the same thing, so for example, with the people who become recluses. Once they generalized it, they're now taking the bus by themselves. They're not only going to the games and playing by themselves without me being there, like one of them started running 2 games a week at different game stores.
Wow.
And he's going to the grocery store, and his whole life has gone from this, it's completely opened up. And, of the several clients, there's another one that didn't quite open up as much, so opened up to going to the games, local grocery store, and that's about it. He's still protective, but his bubble has gone from this to this. His quality of life is so much better. Now he has friends and a different peer group. So our goal,
but again, those are all things that all of us,
everybody will benefit. Exactly.
I mean,
extreme examples are just exaggerations of what we all struggle with.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like I run a weekly game for kids, and I've been running it for the same kids for probably like 6 years now or something like that, which is nuts. One of them went to college and then came back. It's crazy. But aside from one like gender queer player, none of them are folks that people would really describe as at risk or anything like that. But it has been wonderful to see them using the game that we're playing to just develop, both in terms of being able to articulate their imagination of something, to decide things, to role play if they want to. Like it's not one of those things where I force them to role play. I want them to engage in the level they want to engage. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But having the conversations with them about how the game is going, or asking them, how do you want this to happen? Or what is your goal here? What are you trying to accomplish out of the scene? What is your character trying to do? Just even questions like that make them think about what they're doing. And then it's also been really interesting to see some of them as they get older go and run games for their peers. And then come back to my table and say, I'm really having a problem with my players. Like,
Help me.
Come, master, what can I do for my minions?
Well,
Running off.
Microwave all their dice.
there is an incredibly gratifying feeling of having the
Yes.
kids go off, then they come back and they're like, I'm so sorry. With what I did.
Really?
That is,
And,
yes.
table.
and suddenly
Yes.
you're Polygon Kenobi.
So,
Yeah.
and this is what we're saying. So our goal is that they go off and that's what we see is they go off and create their own groups. They talk their parents into it, or they work hard to get the money to buy the books. They've different approaches, and they get it, and then we don't see them anymore. And then the parents or they show up later and go, sorry, I'm not around anymore, but I started my own group and I'm having a wonderful time. And the parents are like, oh my goodness, he never hung out, or she was always alone. Now she's got a group, they're out doing stuff. I've never seen them so happy in their life. That's what we want to see.
It is kind of amazing what a difference friends make.
Yeah, well, and
life,
going to the school teachers. So it's St. George's, which is a like Bill Gates' niece went there and everything. It's a private school. We've got one of our kids there who's hammering the teacher, going, "We need a program like this at our school."
Yeah.
And so that the parent came to me telling me this Friday, like, "Hey, how do they get this going?" And so that's what we want to see happen, is that they take the lead and the leadership skills, et cetera, that are developed through these opportunities.
Yeah. There's actually, for like, while I was doing this research for educational purposes, like because we're doing in general, there's actually a couple like notable teachers, like Sarah Roman, who actually is an English teacher who role plays like books like Beowulf and also what is it, Canterbury Tales, and it makes
One
it.
sounds more exciting than the other.
One does sound, but she
all
allows
in for the
it
Canterbury
and creates these sessions that people can actually role play these characters as and follow the points in the story, and it keeps them more like empathy. It has you're able to absorb it a little
Well,
bit
like
better.
from the educational aspect, that also makes me kind of want to talk about seems to me like a somewhat of a trend popping up on Kickstarter here and there of people trying to make games that really try to help you engage with a product in a different way. Like Beowulf the board game, or Moby Dick the card game. I don't know if anybody has played that, but like Moby Dick the card game is a really
Honestly,
weird.
I feel like I've been hunting for that game my entire life.
Well, I can help you be dragged under the sea with it. But it's a very
Doesn't he
weird.
die in
Like these are really neat ways to engage with a thing that is supposed to be kind of a pillar of our culture that people have trouble navigating through the usual method. You end up with these really interesting experiences that present you with another facet of something to explore that I find really intriguing.
So a little bit more back to the research, got
Yes.
some anecdotes, et cetera, some of the research. So for example, Kohei Kato, a Japanese PhD, who I think won an award for his country related to this research.
Nice.
He was at some
the whole country won?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, the country awarded him for his research. And he's been traveling the last few years. So he did a 16-week
Japan.
studies with control groups. So we got nice longitudinal. He did a really good study. It's one of the better studies out there.
Nice.
On role-playing games for young teenagers on the spectrum and such. And he did baselines and then progress tests. And so, for example, and these posters are all on the RPGresearch.com website. He gladly gave us permission to help spread it. It's not in journals, but we make sure we get this out there. And this has been peer-reviewed and overseen and all of that. So session 1, group comes in, and the speech not directed to other children's at 63.3%. So they're doing whatever. They're not really working with the other kids.
Gotcha.
And only 36.7% was directed to the other kids. By week 14, that's now 52.4% talking to the kids. We went from 36 to 52% in 14
I was
weeks.
going to say, how many weeks? 14.
Yeah, that was in 14, and there were a couple more weeks after that. With consensus and failure of consensus. Session 1, complete failure of consensus. So remember we talked about forming, storming, norming, performing,
Yep.
Yes.
Tuckman's theories? That everybody goes through that in all professions, all walks of life. Whenever you bring a team together, which is what a gaming group is, with different skills and you're trying to achieve a goal, you're going to have to go through these phases, and you don't have consensus at first. You have to work towards that. And the groups who don't get past the storming phase don't do that, and they fall apart, and it's chaos. And you see that in gaming as well as others. But gaming teaches, either more rigidly in some of the rules and others being just through trial and error, that you need to work together. This goes all the way back to Alan Fine's 1983 piece about working together for the social good, that you benefit from that as well.
Yeah.
And so at the end of session 1, Failure consensus, complete. Making consensus went, so this was on a scale, basically a 6-fold improvement. They said now they're 6 out of 7 times they're coming to consensus and such. Every now
So
and
this
then.
is after this 14-week program
Yeah,
of
most of the
role-playing
time
game.
they're able to build a consensus.
They're
and work
talking to
together.
each other more.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
coming to agreement on what they're talking about more.
Right, and how to approach everything and overcome challenges, etc.
All right. This is a great way to say start a revolution
Yeah.
with a bunch
Forming
of.
plans.
So yeah, no, like if you're really looking to start a revolution, get a bunch of your disgruntled friends together and start role playing.
Well, I get hired by corporations for company retreats and such to train their sales and executive staff to do a game to do the team building. Right? When I was an
Yeah, yeah.
executive in the tech industry, we would go off on retreats and they would have team building exercises. And that the goal was that then we'd then go out in the world and we've built a camaraderie, we've gotten to the performing phase, and we're ready to take on the world and beat the competition. This is a microcosm. Now, most games you won't get through all of that in one session unless you have a lot of very experienced gamers
Yes.
Yeah.
who have their stuff together.
Yeah.
And often that's not the case. It only takes one person to be disruptive of that. But when you get that, it can happen in one session. Most of the time it takes multiple sessions. And that's shown here as a common experience. The other important part is quality of life.
Yes.
Just overall quality of life. And there are established measures of that in different fields. And so he did that as well. So in addition to the communication and the consensus building, he measured things like their self-ratings of their physical well-being, their emotional well-being, their self-esteem, their connections with family, friends, school. So prior to it and then post, we saw different ranges of benefit. The smallest improvement was in the school side. That's where we saw the least change. Where it gets large was with friends, physical well-being, emotional well-being, and then kind of medium on the self-esteem. And that's just in 14, 16 weeks.
Yeah.
These are measurable improvements. So for example, and I'll try not to do too many numbers here, but just to give you a little bit. So on the smaller side for self-esteem, they scored well, like 41% scored well when they started. When they finished, it was up around 50%. So you saw a modest improvement there. It was still, but it was measurable.
Yeah.
But the emotional well-being went from 49 to 71% improved. They're just feeling emotionally so much better. And even their physical well-being, because a lot of that shows up physically and
Yeah.
affects our health
Absolutely.
and everything.
Yep.
From 50 to 66%, right? And friends, 36 to 52. So, and again, I'm trying to really simplify the language here. I'm not using,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should be using more technical jargon, but I'm
It
trying
is
to simplify.
technical.
Hours of material
Yeah,
to try
yeah.
and cram
Yeah.
into
But you get
this
the idea.
very short session. so-
Really measurable results. He wasn't doing anything like, it wasn't a targeted therapeutic session. It was just doing the
Just the
gaming
game.
with appropriate controls and such.
Yes.
Yeah.
And these are measurable things. And so that helps when you improve people's emotional and physical well-being, their connections with family and friends, their connections with school, the ripple effect that starts to happen. And I've been seeing it. I've been doing this long enough now. I see a huge ripple effect. So yeah, that's just little snippets right
Well,
there.
it's crazy.
And that comes
'cause
down to like just social
these-
adjustment.
Yeah, these are the kinds of things that they throw you in school or whatever. It's like they just expect you to figure it out. You know, no one's like, here's how you make friends. Like most people don't have any sort of guidance or
Yeah,
rule
scaffolding.
structures. Yeah.
Role-playing games are wonderful for providing scaffolding for all kinds of learning challenges.
Yeah.
Well, like, there's always that question of like, how do I make friends? Like my answer is, get a game. Like you need friends for it. Like,
Yeah.
are you young? Are you old? Are you retired? and
common
need to-
interests help.
Yeah, are you retired
Yeah.
and need to build a new friend community? Go play some games.
Yep.
And
This
not,
is a lot more forgiving than Foursquare.
not that many of my close friends I actually met through gaming. A few were, but I met great people through gaming.
Yeah.
Other people, it's lifelong friendships, and it depends upon what age you're in, and male versus female, and things like that. Those kind of affect when you build new relationships and such. But you will meet and have a new, healthier peer group. We've seen that with our transitions from inpatient drug rehab to outpatient with using gaming groups and such. They don't go back, because if you take away the drugs and the gang, you have to replace it with something else, because the
Absolutely.
gang gave them social belonging and the drugs gave them some sort of outlet for all their anxiety and such. And the gaming community really can be a healthy substitute. We've seen really great results from that with different programs throughout King County and elsewhere.
Oh, okay. Go
So yeah, we've only got like a couple more minutes that we can talk about this, but we've got a couple of questions for you. These are your questions. I think you should ask them.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. So here's one. What RPG systems or settings are particularly used to learn or have special therapeutic or educational benefits?
I
Yeah.
have
What
done.
games should we be playing or
Yeah,
having other
what's-
people play?
So I'm going to have to give you a nuanced response because there is no one single response.
You
for
have 1
different
minute.
goals.
What? There is no one best to rule
There's
them
no
all?
one basic game.
Yeah. What I have found though is that a lot of the newer games are less effective than many of the older games.
Interesting.
They are less benefit for math and cognitive challenges and reading because they've dumbed down the reading level and they've dumbed down the math level. So what used to show up for raising math and English skills for men and women, we're not seeing that effect much anymore in newer games.
Because there's less math.
Because they're not being pushed and striving and raising it. You lower the bar, you're not raising people up. You raise the bar and then encourage people incrementally, you raise everybody up. So that's one area.
So falling damage needs to go back in.
Well, it is always about a balance. We
All
have,
about
for
the
example,
Renaissance.
been starting to do less and less 5th edition and go back to BECME, which is the old 1983 Frank Metzer basic D&D, because the consequences are much more immediate. So 5th edition, it's really hard to die, right? You got saving throws and for death saving throws over and over, and so causality is harder to learn.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter young or old. It's amazing. The closer you pair consequence to action, the better people learn it. And with the old school games, 0 hit points is your character's dead.
Oh yeah.
And your character keeps dying. Now it only takes 15 minutes to make a character, so that's why the community programs are finding that helpful. And the simplicity of the game makes it easier for them to focus on their actions had a consequence. There are great things about 5th edition. We love 5th edition in a lot of ways. I like it way more than 4th and more than 3rd edition for different reasons.
Fourth.
The version of which we do not
3.5.
speak.
I'm sorry, we invited actual Satan to the table today?
Fourth.
So the ones
Just
we
kidding.
like
Satan
to
would be
use
cooler than that.
as far as at-risk populations where you have any concerns. So if you don't have any concerns about your population,
Yeah.
you can use pretty much any role-playing game and get some benefit. However, if you have any concerns about your population, whether it's mental health, whether it's age, whatever, here's what we like to use and recommend. Cubicle 7's got some great products and their approach to gaming. So the One Ring role-playing game, which is a Middle-earth licensed one, you have great behavior modification built into for heroic-only play. If you do bad things, you gain shadow points. If you get too many shadow points, you lose control of your character, you pull a Boromir. The DM takes your character away, and your character goes crazy for a bit, then you get him back, and then each time it gets worse. And eventually you go dark side and become a minion of Sauron or Wraith.
I mean, somebody's going to do that job.
If you do good things, you
That's
get
important
hero
to the story.
points, and hero points and the group can work together, and it's very collaborative, totally encourages, it reduces murder hoboism big time.
Yeah. Okay.
Another one that's really great, if that's fantasy, but the people, not everybody likes fantasy, believe it or not.
I
People
believe
like
it.
Others.
Yeah.
Doctor Who Adventures in Time and Space, also from Cubicle 7. And by the way, we are one of the few organizations that we have permission licensing from the organization, from all these products, Wizards of the Coast, etc., to use these and do fundraising and make money and such. If you don't have permission to do that, you should reach out to them and get permission. It doesn't cost anything. It takes time. You got to get through the corporate firewall. But you are using intellectual property to make money. You need to take that into account. And role-playing games always kind of weird about that.
Yeah, they are. But in particular, I noticed that both of those games that you mentioned have very strong recognizable IPs around them.
They happen to. They don't need to.
My question was, is do you find that useful in kind of getting people on board initially?
Right. So what happens is when you have a common world that everybody can relate to, a superhero world that everybody can relate to, Middle Earth, things like that. I like to use Arthur because there's no King Arthur and such. There's no intellectual property
Oh, I
control
thought you
over
meant
that.
the movie.
No. King Arthur, Knights
no
Round
IP.
Table, etc.
I was thinking more
So
like
for my
clenching.
like
Public
campaigns,
domain.
The whole adventure is you get lost between the moon and New York City.
Yeah.
King Arthur I like to use because most people have some awareness, even in Japan and elsewhere, of the Arthurian legends. So I can say King Arthur and Merlin and Mordred and all that, and they have some idea of the world. And that gives them a common starting place because you're going into fantasy and weird stuff. They need to have somewhere to connect with. So Doctor Who is great because we do it in a way we don't let them. Sometimes we don't let them know it's Doctor Who. The character sheets are shaved, and they're starting modern day, and they're students or whatever, and strange things happen, and it's a Scooby-Doo type thing, and then the sci-fi stuff kicks in. Others who we know are Doctor Who because we do assessments and like Doctor Who, we're like, yeah, this is Doctor Who, let's go. And so the great thing about Doctor Who Adventure Time and Space, those rules, the most violent action goes last in initiative. And the least violent, talking and such, goes first. And you can change your mind and bump up the line in initiative if you want to do that.
Sounds very Doctor Who.
Yes. Well, exactly. That's the idea. Because Doctor Who was trying to avoid violence. It's not his fault he always had to blow up entire civilizations, but you know. And also the story points. Story points are necessary to advance your character. You have to spend story points to do violence. You gain story points for coming up with more creative solutions. So really the trick is to be a really nice guy, right up until they piss you off, and then just lay down the story
Let
point
it all
whoop
out.
ass. For younger, no
Doctor
thank
Who.
you evil. No thank you evil is
Love No
wonderful
Thank
for
You
Monty
Evil.
games.
Huge fan.
Now, what we recommend for the younger audiences is the add a little physicality to it. Luckily, the games are already short 20, 40-minute sessions. But we add things like the bee dance and other things. So when they meet Mrs. B and stuff, we get up and we're like, do the bee dance, you know, and things like that.
Nice.
Get
Show me the
kids
bee
up.
dance again.
That was great.
And because, you know, bees,
bee
they
dance,
wiggle, 3 this way and then turn and do 2 that way. And we get the kids and try to get the adults, too, to get up and get physical with that. That keeps them engaged more because it takes more cognitive power for little kids to sit still than to move.
My nephew just
It
started
actually
his first
takes
session, so I'm
effort,
pretty
and
excited.
they can't focus when they're not on the move, when they're little. So we have recommendations on our site. We have different tiers of games we recommend for different groups on our site. And those are some of the ones we use at the introductory level.
And what is that site?
RPGresearch.com.
So you can go to rpgresearch.com and you can check out a lot of the things that this man has been working on. I would like to thank you for being here again today.
Thank you.
Hockey
Yes,
came all the way
thank
out
you
here from
so
Eastern
much.
Washington just to sit with us for an hour and talk
Gladly.
about what you do. I'm sure we're probably going to have you back again
Please.
to talk
Yes.
more about it because we have a lot more
Yeah, we just-
questions.
We
Barely
barely
scratch it.
scratched
Yeah,
all
we-
the.
Yeah,
I have
5%.
notes.
I was about to say maybe we should dial into specifics.
Yeah, I think
That's what I was
if we
suggesting.
dial in-
I was
to
Pick
get
one
a
of these.
general overview of what we can.
Yeah, I know. I know,
Yeah.
but apparently for next time
So
we
next
need
time
to
you
just
like
pick
one
one.
category.
One
Exactly.
category, okay.
That's what I'd recommend.
But that's a basic overview of what you do. Obviously, you have a lot more information about the specific topics that we are going to have questions about. I can almost guarantee we're probably going to bring you back to
Please,
us
Yes.
that'd be
to
great.
ask
And
you about
RPG
those
Therapeutics,
specifics.
we pay our game masters starting pay is 20 to 60 an hour.
There you go.
It, of course, adjusted different incomes and such. We are actively hiring, but it's really hard to get hired. Our requirements are very strict. So if you don't meet the requirements, RPG Research has free training. The way you do that is you volunteer. You participate in training once a week. We can do it remotely. Volunteers across 5 continents. And it takes time. Most people takes 1 to 3 years at that rate. If you're going 1 or 2 sessions a week, it takes time. Even if you've got 20 years of gaming experience, even if you're already a therapist, because you have 2 separate knowledge domains doesn't mean you know how to put the 2 together. We've been doing this for decades, successfully, measurably so, and now we've got a pretty good idea of how to do that with great efficacy, optimizing the role-playing game experience. I spent 2 years just on that. It's a small book I need to put together. It's on our website though.
Yep.
Room temperature, lighting, how you lay out the groups, the duration of the groups, all these things. I've studied every little tidbit of that.
The science of table.
We should definitely
Table
talk.
size.
We should talk some more about Gen Con
Unfortunately,
stuff,
yeah,
too.
we should.
That'd be great.
We are going to have to table that for now
Yes.
because we still have a little bit more to get through. Once again, thanks, Hawk Robin,
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thank
RPGresearch.com. You can find out a lot more about that just by clicking on that. All right, time for bundles.
Oh, fast.
Here are the bundles. I'm going to go through this as quickly as I possibly can, but
Yeah.
there is quite a lot. So I'm just going to give you the little short version of it.
Stretch, let's do this.
Okay, Humble Bundle has the Warhammer 40K Dark Heresy set, and that's everything from first and second edition rule books.
Dark
for-
Heresy role-playing game.
Yes, the Dark Heresy role-playing game.
Inquisitors. Sorry.
Yes, indeed.
Nobody expects that.
$18 will get you 26 books, which is a $458 value. That means for the price of dipping your toe into the hobby, you can get the whole set and just be completely immersed.
Literally everything.
It's a lot.
Yep. Now,
I'm not even a Warhammer player, and I'm going to buy this.
well, so these are the books that Fantasy Flight had published previously. Cubicle 7, who we keep mentioning, now has the license for it. So the covers have the logo on it, but we don't know if any of the interior content has been updated or changed or tweaked. But if you don't have it,
They couldn't have
go
gotten to
get
it all.
Yeah.
There are 26 books.
They're really
I've been
fast.
really happy with Cubicle 7's quality.
Yeah.
Unlike Decipher and some of FSG's stuff, where it was kind of just about making the money in the IP, the Cubicle 7 folks really seem to put teams together that are really invested in making that product just really. I've been very happy with the product I've seen from them.
There you go, Cubicle 7, great company, makes a great game. If you want to get into Grimdark for under $20, this is your chance, folks. There's 12 days left on this Humble Bundle. Check it out if you can.
No happiness allowed, right?
No happiness allowed, except the happiness that you get from getting so much content for so little money.
Yeah, and
I'm
the
always a
joy
big fan
of
of that.
following Slanesh.
I don't like Grimdark, but I love sales. All right, now over to Kickstarters with our Kickstarter queen, Derek.
So we've got a couple to go through fairly quickly. Again, we have Meow, which is
Meow.
apparently a game based off of the
Cults.
classic game of Mao.
Mao, meow,
Yeah,
and then
no,
Mao.
no, we all got that. We all got that part. It was what Mao is that we're a little confused
Mao.
about. Nope.
Isn't that what you do when you're like really, really hungry and you have several bowls of food in front of you that are
That's
technically?
chow down.
Oh.
All right.
You don't mow down on that.
Mao is a incredibly frustrating, fascinating metagame.
Okay.
You can
Okay.
play the traditional game of Mao with just a deck of cards, or a couple of decks of cards, I think, shuffled together. What you're going to do is somebody's going to know the rules, and you, as the new player, is not going to know any of the rules, and they're going to start playing the game. They're not going to tell you the rules. You're, of course, going to mess it up immediately. They're going to take everything you love away from you, and you're going to lose horribly.
So Grimdark.
Yeah,
No
Grimdark.
happiness.
Paranoia.
No happiness and no joy, except
Oh, it is paranoia,
eventually,
yeah.
because they're not telling you the rules, you start to pay really close attention. You start to understand and figure things out, and you feel so cool when
Are
you
there
do a
secret
thing.
So,
combinations?
wait,
Why
so the
don't-
game
why
is
don't-
played by somebody who knows how to play it, teaching
Why
somebody who
don't
doesn't
we?
know how to play
Why don't we
it.
take a
Yeah.
step
That's
back?
required.
by not saying anything.
Why don't we
Yeah.
take a step back and describe the actions of the game? From what I understand, you're basically playing a card.
Yeah.
You're trying to play a card and not break any rules.
Yes.
If you can do that, you win the game. The rules that you need to not
Well,
break.
you're trying to go through all of
yeah,
your cards.
the rules that you need to not break are all the cards that are in the other player's hands. So, as an example, perhaps you could play a card that's like, you have to recite, like a city name that nobody else has mentioned. I think is one of
Yeah.
their examples. And if you can't do that, then you have broken a rule and you can't have played the card. So you're trying to get rid of your hand by not breaking rules
take the
that
card back.
other people have in their hands that you don't know yet.
Also,
Oh, okay.
in traditional Mao, people make up rules too.
Yes.
They just make up the rule in their head, and none of this is communicated at all. So the only way to learn this is someone plays a 7 and they say Copenhagen or whatever, and then you have to try and figure out what does that mean. Is it a city name? So it's all about social deduction and figuring
So it's
things
like
out.
that, but with cats.
That's-
0 days left on this Kickstarter.
Well, the-
Adorable. Yeah, cute.
The
yeah.
other important thing is that this Kickstarter has a like a party game kind of casual version,
Yes.
and a more strategic, more complicated version. So they're trying to publish both,
But with
to
cats.
get you a
Well,
little
it's
bit of
more
a
than
range.
just cats. There's all kinds of cute, fluffy animals on
Yeah,
here,
and
by
stretch
the
goal
way.
animals, it's only got a few hours left, so you can unlock some of those more adorable animals.
More
Because only thing better than adorable
More
animals
adorable?
is more adorable.
More adorable.
More adorable. You can't simply
Ultra.
just
Yes.
walk into more adorable animals.
All right, moving on.
Too much?
Shazin, the political strategy board game, also having 0 days left, closing today.
Yep.
An epic game of politics, ethics, and strategy for 3 to 5 players. So I got a chance not to play this at Gen Con, but to check out the
I also got a chance
amazing...
not to play it at Gen
Me
Con.
too.
High five!
That's my not to sit down and play a whole playthrough of this game, but I did get to see the box.
Which is
Gorgeous
good.
art,
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
as
Like,
good.
the components
as-
are really, really
yeah,
nice.
amazing components. And I got to look at some of the cards and some of the moral dilemmas. So you're playing as political figures with agendas, but you're actually looking through the morality questions of these cards. Things like, should it be required by law to sing the national anthem before watching a movie? And for our culture, in the US culture, they're like, that's completely bizarre. Who would ever do such a thing? And then someone else says, yeah, what about a baseball game? We sing the national anthem before baseball games? How is that
any
different?
sporting event.
Yeah,
Any
any
sporting
sporting
event.
event. So you get into interesting conversations, but some of it is very
Except wrestling.
tense. And some of these questions are like very politically fraught. So this is definitely a game. This is not going to be a nice, polite game.
I love games of moral dilemmas. I love them.
Well, they specifically have, there were at least 3 playsets part of it initially, and I think they've had some more as stretch goals.
Yeah.
That was like a near future Indian election, a near future US election,
Yes.
which are both going to be very current event stuff.
Right,
But-
Brexit is another one.
But
Yeah.
also
Brexit.
they were doing historical Rome election.
Yeah. And the other thing is, this isn't a light party game. This is a serious strategic political game. So
Yep.
like
Yeah.
90-minute playtime.
They made
So
it
you're-
look like it was a party game.
Right,
though.
exactly.
But it is like you have to think
Yeah.
about what.
But
your
serious
current
means it
three-
can still be fun, right?
Yes.
Because I have a big problem with games that are not fun.
Yeah.
There's a whole conference they just wrapped up in I think it was in Quebec just a couple weeks ago. One of
Yeah.
our researchers there, which is serious games.
Serious games.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they do on that, and of course you're still having fun, but the goal is to use these games to achieve
Yep.
Yeah.
measurable goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so zero days left on that, yeah?
Yeah, so it sounds
Yes.
like if you want to get into political games, if you're the kind of person who likes that building your political empire kind of thing,
Yes.
this seems like a slam dunk game.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yet another game with 0 days left
All the 0 days.
is
Yay.
Zero
Ultra
exploits.
Tiny Epic Galaxies. So some of you may be familiar with Tiny Epic Galaxies. This is that,
This is tinier.
but smaller. So like Tiny Epic Galaxies wanted to be the full galaxy spanning 4X kind of game experience, but
Right.
smaller. I think it came in a box like this big.
Yeah.
Well, now it comes in a box like
Now
this
they've
big.
It can fit
smallarized
it
it
in your
even further.
pocket.
With a ray gun. That
Yep,
was
I was
on
about to say, like the
Kickstarter
technology is
page.
further increased.
Yeah.
They got the ray gun to shrink it down
They figured
further.
out how to work their
Wait,
pin
wait.
particles.
So if you can do
Moore's
it in
Law.
augmented reality, then it won't be a big game. It's like so small you can't even see it physically.
Yes.
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 Yep. So if we all, yeah. But I have a feeling that the cases to fit all the Google glasses in that you would need to play the game
Yeah.
would be larger than this box.
The whole
So this
game
might
is
still be
just a
smaller.
contact lens.
Yep.
Right, you just get it implanted into your eyeball.
So
Natural one.
The future of gaming.
this is apparently the full game. It's the full game experience, just
Yeah.
really small.
Okay.
If you like Tiny Epic Galaxies and thought, man, this was too big,
This
Yeah.
game is too big.
Too big.
Tiny game is too
And now you're
frickin'
covered.
big.
all right.
So there you go. Tiny Epic Galaxies.
Okay,
Boom.
Now we get to projects with 1 day left.
One
Ready?
day.
So a little time, but not a lot.
Yes.
This one is Necrodroids.
Can you talk faster?
No.
Okay.
So Necrodroids, this is basically, do you play 40K and do you like the Necrons and wish Games Workshop would release more models? Well, they're not. So there's this project to do something very similar.
Yay,
It's going to be
Necrons.
real expensive for Necron fans because you're going to need a lot of them, but they look really cool.
Figurines.
There you go.
Cool.
More Necrons. Who doesn't want that?
Now I know why
That
you
sounds
wanted
like-
me to talk faster is because you wanted to talk about the next one.
No, I want to talk more about these Necrons.
I don't think so.
No, please.
What's
Tons
next?
of Necrons.
Let's-
BattleTech, 1 day left. The BattleTech Clan Invasion game is coming out. The Kickstarter has been friggin' epic, okay? They made $1 million in the first week. That is a sign of a good Kickstarter. The stretch goals
Or good
have
marketing.
been off the chain. They're like, oh, you get all these minis, and then they're like, oh, we made our stretch goals, so now we're gonna double those for you.
Yeah.
They're doing redesigns of mechs that have not been seen in years and years. They're finally redoing my Gladiator, which I'm very excited about. I hear good things about the Kodiak as well. Clan Invasion is one of the most exciting times in BattleTech history, even though it's like the meanest in a lot of ways.
Are they going to offer a working mech at some point here if it keeps?
Oh
up?
no! I think,
yeah.
I think
Because
they
they got a
made that
few
today.
out there.
They've got. Say it. Come on. Plushie mechs. There are plushie mechs.
Plushies.
that you can use on the battlefield. Probably not. That's probably a lie. But you can put them
Set
on,
them on fire.
Use them on the
You
battlefield.
should.
the board.
I mean,
Who's
if you
gonna stop
demand,
you?
if you demand a
Who's gonna stop
plushie
you?
game,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tons of new minis with
A
brand
whole
new
separate
scopes.
game you play with just the plushies.
So if you've got the old versions of these mechs and you've been wanting an update, they're doing that just because you have thrown so much money at them. I'd say back this Kickstarter, but they don't need you. They just don't need you.
You need them.
You need them.
So-
If you buy in today or tomorrow, you can get basically a truckload of stuff
The
for about
truck comes to
150
your
bucks.
I do have to say that my only real interaction with BattleTech was when I was playing Rifts, and we would buy the technical readouts to figure out what robots we wanted to pretend we were in. So at some point, you'll have to explain to me the intricate geopolitical nature of the Inner Sphere and the clan invasion and all that, because I have no idea.
Oh, it's tons of it, but basically it's
At
like
some point.
Yeah, it's like a barbarian Nazis from the past, but in like way better stuff than the stuff you've got.
Sure. Oh, cool.
Yeah, there you go.
So
Great.
future
Go back to
barbarian
FASA
Nazis from the
with,
past.
Yeah, they're
Like Atlantis
meritocracy, but they're all
attacks.
like super, racist against people who aren't part of their genetic line.
For some reason, those seem to go together a lot.
Yeah, I know. Rifts did it.
something we can talk about
Anyway,
Speaking of exciting futures we can look forward to,
yes, let's.
Another Kickstarter. Now we're going to go from 1 day to 5.
5 days left
Yep.
on this.
5 days.
So this is the first of 2, count them 2, Nurgle-themed Blood Bowl armies.
Remind me what Nurgles are again?
Nurgles.
So if you want a fantasy football team that is full of pustules, disease, expanding mutant arms, and really
Jacksonville
weird,
Jaguars.
nasty stuff,
Yeah.
then you are here for Nurgle.
Yeah.
I'm really sad we couldn't get
Us.
3 because that was his magic number. But
We're
anyway.
getting a heart from the tech crew, I think.
Yep. So this one is Plague Fields Miniatures Hungry Troll. So this is, I guess, kind of like both of these are kind of revamps of older armies or older teams that have come out.
It's because these are non-infringing Nurgles, right?
They
Nurgle
don't
adjacent.
technically use the term Nurgle, but
Right.
like it's disease. They call it plague.
Yeah. We all
Threes
know.
show up a whole lot. We know what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's if you're looking for more Nurgly kind of thing, especially because Death Guard is a really big 40k army right
Yeah.
now. If you're looking for some other stuff to use for your Nurgle demons or for your Death Guard,
who
something
isn't?
a little bit different, or for your Age of Sigmar folks, then this is definitely worth checking.
That's the skirmishing
Yeah.
one, right?
No, that's the fantasy one. Skirmishy one is Kill Team.
Kill
Yeah.
Team. Sorry,
Ah.
Kill Team Sigmar.
but like-
Bonus naked cheerleader.
Yeah,
thrown
yep.
in.
There
With
is.
good measure.
There is a Total Recall-esque 3 endowed.
Boobin.
uh,
A 3 boobin
triply
cheerleader.
endowed. Yeah, so.
She has been unbranded.
Yep. That is an unfortunate trait that we don't have a similarly endowed masculine
I just want
With 3
nudity,
crawly
equality,
things.
something.
or at least some of the.
You
What
didn't
else
get your
would-
3 donged Nurgle
Nope.
linebacker
Right.
that
Nope.
you really wanted.
Nope.
And just to have some of the trolls, the like pustule oozing trolls, be women as well. Just have it go both
So
ways.
maybe some of them are.
Doesn't
But anyway,
look like it.
if you want some
But
alternative
the
stuff
cheerleader is
for your
definitely
Death
naked.
Guard,
We checked it out.
yeah, that is an unfortunate. I think it's going to be a strike against this project for
I'm
me.
afraid so. Yeah. Although the holding up the severed heads and being an actual scary creature.
That's okay.
That's okay.
This is that puritanical
America,
distortion of
violence
sex and
good,
violence.
sex
No,
yeah.
no, no. But like honestly, when you over sexualize something, it's generally just weird. But when you over sexualize something that's already horrific, I feel it makes it more horrific because it's making me uncomfortable and aroused at the
I
same
feel
time.
like
Yeah.
you're making the rest of us uncomfortable by revealing a lot about your inner psychology.
Oh no,
here.
I was only revealing a tiny bit about my inner
We're
psychology.
never playing Kingdom Death
Yeah.
together, by the way.
No,
That
no,
is
we
not
are not.
happening.
Sure.
But yeah.
All right.
And next one.
Because I'll bring
We
kids.
got
By the
negative
way,
1 minute.
we got okay. 5 days left on this one. Hey, you want a game from ancient Egypt and nobody knows how to play? Let's play this. It's pretty. It's a really pretty wood thing.
It's pretty. It's a board.
It's called Meh.
It's gonna make a
Meh.
great giant coaster for
Meh.
your coffee table.
Yep.
It's a very pretty. Okay, so like the reason why I liked it is because it's not just laser engraved. It's CNC woodwork and all of that stuff. Okay,
It's like
quality.
gorgeous
How do you play the
workmanship
game?
How do you play it? I don't know.
How do you play any
Oh, well,
game?
How do you play any game?
Hold
You
on,
roll
right
the
here. I'll
bones.
just read this. Oh, they don't know what the rules are to the game.
So they made up some new rules
They
that
did
they
a little
thought
bit of research.
fulfilled all
and then
the
they say that
historical
those aren't the
details.
rules.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Yeah.
Buy the
Totally
wood.
makes sense.
Have you gamed before?
Buy the wood, stay for the
Is it-
game,
How
I
many
guess.
RPGs have you opened up and they're like, the golden rule is there are no rules?
That's not true for board games. We're not
Board
talking
games?
about Dungeons and Dragons. We're talking about a board game.
Somebody
we can change
makes up
whatever
the
rules we
rules.
want whenever.
Yeah. House
Yeah, I know.
rules.
That's why you put money in the middle in Monopoly. I get it. You have house rules.
You know, actually, this is just an elaborate setup to have people summon ancient Egyptian.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
so
that
to
too.
get to
These
some
were
de-
used
to-
in religious practices.
To get to some details,
Yes.
it's a very gorgeous board of a
snake.
snake circling in, and you're moving your pieces trying to get to the head, and bad pieces are moving out to the tail. And they basically research what they what everybody at the time was talking about the game.
Yeah.
And then they tried to design a game that they felt fulfilled those things.
Did they bring in the stone 20-sided die from Egypt, that ancient Egyptian?
I'm
no,
just
they
saying,
actually have
there
lion
are so many of these
pieces
ancient
and-
games that are out there that we don't know the rules to, that were used primarily in their religious rituals as religious practices.
Yeah.
We don't know what ancient gods we are offending by buying or playing these games. What if we accidentally play
Sacrifice.
it right?
Sacrifice!
But then on the flip side, they're using modern board game design principles, presumably play testing and making an actual good game instead of just trying to, as some other Kickstarters have done, vomit up an old game, be like, this is old, so it's cool. It's like they didn't actually design games very well back then.
Okay, the correlation for this would be, for me anyway, like in the far, far future, we have forgotten all of history, right?
Yeah.
Somebody digs up some old
Monopoly.
World War II stuff, for example, and they're like, wow, these Nazi guys had really sweet uniforms. Hey, let's make them the heroes of this new movie. That's where this can go terribly wrong.
Counterpoint. In 1,000 years, I absolutely want to see what game people will try to reconstruct when they just have half-burned Rifts books.
Yes.
And you have to admit you would love to see
Or
that too.
they might
Yes, I
say
would.
Because
that
it would
they're-
look, it would look exactly like Rifts.
Damn it, Derek, you found my weak
They might
spot,
say
and it's
that they're
Rifts.
religious documents. They might attribute them to our current religion. Maybe this wasn't religion at all, you know?
Anyway, what it comes down to is
It was-
this is
it was
a
5,000 years ago.
This is an
No, what if the
expensive.
Bible's just
This
a
is an
really-
They thought
expensive
buildings were
luxury
God.
game because it's like $160, $200, I think, but it is a handcrafted wooden board. It looks
Yeah,
really cool.
But you can get a $10 print and play.
No, don't do
Don't
that.
do that.
All right. I'm sorry.
Anyway,
All right, moving on. Import Export, the definitive edition. So this is a remake of the Import Export game by Jordan Draper Games. Jordan Draper, known for making small box games with a lot of meat and a lot of stuff in there. So this is an auction bidding, commodity speculation, pick up and deliver economic role selection game.
When you simplify it like that,
So it's got a lot of stuff. Basically, and that's a lot of fancy words to say you have boats, container ships, they're going around.
boats.
You're bidding on the stuff, getting it. Very cutthroat game, very cutthroat economic game where you can really screw yourself over by
Yep, don't mess up.
bidding incorrectly. Yes, and really cool metal bits.
yeah. So like this definitive edition, because the old one I think was mainly cards.
Yeah.
You would have a card that represented your ship. You'd lay the cards of the containers down on it. Now it's like no. You get a metal ship. Here's some metal
Is it
containers.
a
Yeah.
tabletop version of EVE Online?
Yes.
That
Oh.
Darwinian style?
Much less spreadsheets,
Okay.
and none of the excitement of being able to attack your other
Okay.
opponents.
and
But-
almost no real economy.
Excitement
Oh, okay.
of buying stuff and using fake money and pretending that you have real money.
Monopoly?
Yeah,
Neat.
exactly.
But yeah, like the components just look absolutely gorgeous
Yeah.
because it is a bunch of metal ships and metal shipping containers that look like shipping containers.
Yeah.
So if you want, again, a very cutthroat economic game
Yeah,
that's really high quality.
yeah.
And then the final Kickstarter
Ha! We're there.
is the second
Did it.
Nurgle one. This is Willy Miniatures Lord of Corruption. Or
Wait.
Lords of
It's such
Corruption.
a friendly name for
Willy?
Lord-
Willy.
Was it? Does it have Willies on there?
I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
if by
Yeah.
Willies you mean someone named Willy.
No,
gives you
we
the
were talking
willies.
about dongs again.
Nope.
No.
There is a cheerleader, but she's wearing clothes this time.
Flesh
Oh.
color.
This team is again very nurgly, very plague-ridden.
Does she have 3 boobs?
We don't know.
She
She's
does
wearing a
not. She
shirt.
does not have 3 boobs.
Yeah.
Could
be a micro
The
boob
shirt
in
she's
there.
wearing is tight enough that you can.
Okay, I didn't see the figure. I imagined that I would know. Yeah.
But
Anyway.
yeah, so this one is another nurgly themed, another plague theme army or team,
Yeah.
but it's a little more football-y in the kind of the design. It looks a little bit more like a kind of a traditional Blood Bowl team.
Yep.
Although some things to note is that I think like the winged beast or captain or whatever is basically just mini Cthulhu. And there's a couple ancillary ones that are pretty neat. Like you get a gardener, who's just like the guy who would go across the field and kind of rake it to make it even, because
nice.
that's
Yeah.
Nurgle, the Garden of Nurgle. It's a thing. If you're into it, it's a thing, and it's
Okay.
neat.
Yep.
Seems like a stretch, but sure.
But if
But
you're
anyway,
not into it,
if you're me, you backed both of them.
okay.
So
7 days left on that Kickstarter, everybody. Now, don't forget that a new release rundown is coming up right after we walk our happy little butts out of here, which we need to do 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Whoops.
But before we go, I would like to point out that the Gen Con streams that we did live at Gen Con are all available as of 37 minutes ago on YouTube. So
Nice.
if you
You'll
are
see a
curious
lot of me.
as to what we did at Gen Con and what everybody else did at Gen Con, everything that we live streamed from that 4-day event.
Almost everything.
Almost everything that we live
The
streamed.
mobile camera stuff is still being worked on.
We'll get hey, don't worry, we're gonna get all your
We
man
need
on the
the
street stuff done.
on-the-floor footage.
But
All
yeah, you
the
can check out
footage.
everything else on YouTube right now. All the mobile camera stuff will be, I'm sure, uploaded presently.
Yeah.
They'll get that up as soon as they get it up. But you have hours and hours of content you can check out right now
much
on
stuff.
YouTube. Make sure you do that.
What's the URL?
The URL? Oh yeah, I'll just look that up on my piece of paper here. No, don't have it.
Is it
It's
slash Gen Con?
Yeah, I mean, if you
It's in
It's in
chat.
chat.
You can
Yeah,
check it
yeah,
out.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
on
yeah.
your screen
and
right
if
now.
you just
are
go to
so
YouTube
lucky.
and search for Gen Con
Gen Con
TV,
TV.
just find the channel for Gen Con.
They don't have their own channel, though.
So that is all the time we have for Table Takes presented by Gen Con this week. I'm Christian, this is Bonsai, Emma, Derek, and once again, thank you to our special guest, Hawk Robinson from
Thank you
RPG
very much.
Research.
Yeah.
We will see you all next Friday.
Bye.
Bye now.